This meeting is bilingual in the sense that it's in English and Arabic. There's simultaneous translation available to and from both languages. Interventions can be in both languages as well. Obviously, this is a very interesting time to be discussing Turkish-Arab relations. I would warn, however, that this meeting was planned many months before today. It was not planned after the downing of the Turkish plane. It was not planned after all these very recent events. This is part of a long-term cooperation between TESEV in Istanbul and our center here in Beirut, which also includes cooperation with the Gulf Research Center and other research centers in the Middle East area. The objective is to share perspectives, share information, share understanding, build cooperation in the Middle East in favor of stability, prosperity, and things of that nature. The sessions today are quite clear and self-explanatory. They're all available in your folders. Also, the biographies of all our speakers are there as well, so we will not spend much time doing those introductions. Certainly the topic of Turkish-Arab relations is in great flux. 2 years ago, the headlines of Turkish foreign policy were zero problems, with neighbors, building stability, building trade relations, primarily with Syria and others, but also other countries in the region. Since the Arab Spring or the Arab uprisings, this has certainly challenged Turkish foreign policy as it has challenged Iranian foreign policy or Saudi foreign policy or Russian foreign policy. So Turkish relations with Arab countries very much a topic in challenge, a topic in transition. So I'm very happy today that we have ample time in the sessions, the 3 sessions organized for today to discuss with our Turkish colleagues and with colleagues from Lebanon and the Arab world this very important topic. On this opening session today with me is Mr. Chan Parker, who is the chairperson of TESEV. We were discussing over dinner yesterday. He used to be the chairman of TESEV, but he is now the chairperson of TESEV. Sorry, Chan. This is part of evolving debates and so on. But we're very happy to have him with us, and also Sabiha, who will be speaking in the next session, and other colleagues from TESEV with whom we cooperate very closely. We're also happy and honored to have with us today the ambassador of Turkey to Lebanon, Mr. Inan Ozyildiz, who will also share with us some opening remarks today. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Mr. Parker for his remarks.
Can I address from...
Please do.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our meeting. I am here in my capacity, as Paul has said, as chairperson of the Turkish Economic and Social Studies Foundation, in TESEV for short. It's great to be back in Beirut with the Carnegie Middle East Center for the 2nd year running. May I therefore thank our partner here in Lebanon, the Carnegie Middle East Center, and to Paul and his team for their efforts in organizing this event. I am confident we are going to have another full and engaging day. I'd also like to thank the Strategic Research Center from the Turkish Foreign Ministry and, of course, the Open Society Foundation Turkey for their support of this event. As always, through partnership, we are able to achieve greater than the sum of our parts. When we were here last April, the atmosphere was somewhat different in the region. There was, of course, a prevailing sense of hope and change. Whereas I wouldn't say the future looks entirely bleak, democratic transitions and even the overthrow of existing regimes is proving challenging. But I'm pretty sure most people here desperately want to see peaceful transitions that reflect the desires and demands of the citizens of the region. Obviously, as an independent Turkish think tank based in Istanbul, we at CESEV not only follow these events, but also consider the role of Turkey in supporting the natural aspirations of citizens throughout the region, both as a state and, just as importantly, as civil society. As many of you know, we publish an annual survey of the opinion of Turkey in the Middle East. We initiated this study in the year 2009, and to try and better understand how Turkey is seen in the region and what role it potentially might play. As such, we are trying in some way to understand how Turkey can support the natural aspirations of the people. While we are currently readying the 2012 survey to go live in autumn, let me share some of the 2011 findings with you. Although the region has seen much happen since the survey was conducted just over 6 months ago, we do believe that the results have real relevance. Coming from Istanbul, the first thing I'd like to note is Turkey is seen as more favorably than any other country in the region, with 78% of all respondents had a favorable opinion of Turkey, a result that is consistent over the last 3 years. The results point towards some sort of structural favorability towards Turkey. Turkey is popular. And what it is that makes Turkey popular? Both from the survey and from the work we do, it seems to me that there are a range of factors that contribute to this. One clearly is Turkey's democratic experience. I underline experience. Of course, I do not claim that Turkey is a perfect democracy. We at TESEV have long been campaigning for further reform, and we will still go on doing this. But the experience, particularly over the last decade or so, seems to resonate with the region. As such, the stance of Turkey on the side of people's aspirations was appreciated. It's not just Turkey's democracy, Turkey's economic success, particularly its competitiveness, seems to have won it many fans. Many of us in Turkey are shocked at how popular Turkish soap operas are in the region too. It's evidence of the growing cultural awareness and of affinity with Turkey in the region. But is this sustainable? Indeed, some have suggested that recent events have lessened Turkey's appeal. Without the result of the new survey, which will come out in autumn, I cannot be 100% confident. But I will say this. The number of respondents that have a favorable opinion of Turkey has remained pretty consistent over the past 3 years and does not seem to have been affected by random events or conjecture. I therefore expect a similar proportion this year. But public opinion surveys just offer a snapshot. We cannot say that the numbers alone mean Turkey is the most popular and influential country in the region. Definitely not. What I can say is the factors that make Turkey popular still remain: a democracy, a vibrant economy, and a supporter of positive change in the region. Many have also now noted Turkey's position on Syria as evidence of lessening role in the region. Indeed, at our Carnegie TESEV event in Beirut last year, claimed that Turkey had reached its peak or zenith, and that following the Arab Spring, its role in the region would decline. Well, given that we are here today, a year on, perhaps not. Critics have also focused on Turkey's inability to implement its frame zero problems foreign policy. As most countries in the region do, Turkey, yes, has its challenges, but it's important to see zero problems as an ideal and, in my opinion, a highly commendable one at that. On that, let me not take up too much of your time. With such great audience, I'm sure we're going to have an enlightening event. As such, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and take on Turkey's role in changing region. Many thanks for listening and for coming here.
Thank you, Mr. Packer, for those enlightening opening remarks, and I'd like to invite His Excellency the Ambassador to give us his remarks.
Thank you, Paul. My dear friend, Paul Salem, Director of the Carnegie Middle East Center, dear Mr. Can Packer, Chairman of the Turkish Economic and Social Studies Foundation, my dear colleague, the Ambassador of the Netherlands, distinguished guests and participants. I would like to welcome you all at this timely conference, as Paul said, in interesting times, prepared by two very prominent institutions. I am particularly pleased to learn that the Center for Strategic Research of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also contributed to today's conference. When we discussed last year, more or less in the same format, Turkey's relations with the changing Arab world, the movement of change was at its beginning. Hopes were great. Since then, we have accumulated more knowledge about the forces of change. We know that the transition in the Arab world and the transformation of the Arab societies and political systems will be long, not necessarily smooth, and that the process will definitely require a lot of patience and wisdom. Hopes are still great. Besides, we can also assert that the unprecedented changes we are witnessing will have long-lasting effects on regional as well as on global politics. So it is crucially important for all countries, and Turkey is not an exception, to read this change properly and accordingly. With its rapidly growing economy and increasing political influence, Turkey's policies had, long before the Arab Spring, started getting wider attention from the peoples of the region, as we will see today in the analysis of the results of the TESEV survey. This increasing attention fostered a wide range of expectations from various segments and parties of the Arab societies. Accordingly, a gap between the perceptions and realities regarding Turkey becomes inescapable. Today, I'm sure the participants will address this issue and will have the difficult task to fill this gap properly. When we had started to implement the widely acknowledged zero problems policy with the neighboring countries, we were driven by the same principles we refer today. We continue to implement and safeguard the same principles. The differences emanate from the environment to where these policies are being oriented. When the Arab Spring had come into scene, Turkish foreign policy faced with a choice between sustaining friendly relations with the old regimes and taking side with the popular movements. Convinced about the strength of the wave of change, Turkey has not hesitated much to position itself with the peoples of the region. We followed these principles when we took sides with the people in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. This also applies to our policy vis-à-vis Syria. It was not tolerable for Turkey to sustain good relations with a regime which alienated itself from its own people. We made it clear to the Syrian regime, to the Syrian leaders, from the very beginning, while offering them our full support for a peaceful transition. In implementing its foreign policy, Turkey has always been very sensitive on not to intervene in the domestic affairs of any country. However, This non-interference does not mean a neutrality and a passive attitude with regard to the massacres and oppression. This is why Turkey has been declaring that it would be always supporting the legitimate rights and claims of the oppressed populations. We believe that the transition from archaic structures to pluralistic and democratic political systems cannot be prevented or delayed anymore. We spare no efforts to help our brothers to support their democratic transition. Distinguished guests, let me conclude by saying that Turkey will continue to rest on the same principles and ideals while shaping its foreign policy in the future, because we know that regimes are temporary elements in the history, while the peoples are the permanent ones. I hope that this conference, as its title indicates, will bring valuable contribution and understanding on the perceptions and realities on Turkey's role in a changing Arab world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for that statement outlining some elements of Turkish foreign policy, which someone recently described to me. It used to be 0 problems with neighbors. It's now 0 neighbors without problems. So it gets complicated. So we conclude this first opening session. We start immediately without a break with the first working session, chaired by our colleague Mr. Ula Nassif, and including Ms. Sabiha Gundugar, Masoud Ozkan from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Research Center, and Mr. Wasim Kalaji from the Wasatiyya Forum. Let me mention that these panels and discussions are being videotaped. We will then edit them. It's a very long one-day conference. We will edit them down and they will be put on our website later for people to view them and to benefit from these discussions. Also, there will be summaries of some of the things that were said that will be put on the website as well in English and Arabic, so people can benefit from the discussions who are not here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you, Mr. Packer. Let's move directly to the first session.
أوكي سبا. أود تأكيد الترحيب مجددا في هذه الحلقة عن التصورات والحقائق عن دور تركيا في عالم عربي متغير. أشكر المضيفين المؤسسة التركية للدراسات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية تساف ومركز كارنيجي للشرق الأوسط ودعوتهما إلى الخوض في الإشكالية الجديدة التي تواجه تركيا والعرب اليوم في ظل ما يسمى الربيع العربي عربان. هي مشكلة عودة تركيا إلى الشرق ومشكلة العرب في البحث عن الذات عبر الانقلاب على أنظمة الاستبداد، فإذا بالانقلاب يقود إلى فوضى واقتتال في مكان وتفتت مفهوم الدولة لتولد القبائل في أخرى وانبعاث خطر الخوف على النسيج الاجتماعي في صنف آخر من الدول العربية. اختارت تركيا العودة إلى الشرق وهي تتطلع إلى الانضمام الذي لا يزال مستحيلا إلى الاتحاد الأوروبي، ولا تزال كذلك عضوا فاعلا في الأداة العسكرية للغرب أي حلف الشمال الأطلسي. 3 خيارات متنافرة تحاول تركيا الملائمة بينها من دون أن تفقد موطئ قدم فيها معا. يجمعها بالعالم العربي ما يمكن أن يفرقها عنه أيضا. أكثر التصاقا بالجغرافيا مع سوريا والعراق، تجمع بينها ودول الخليج الدين، وتفرق التجربة السياسية بين حدي الإسلام والديمقراطية والعلمانية. أرضت العرب باستفحال خلافها مع إسرائيل منذ عام 2008، وباتت مع عرب ضد آخرين تشارك في تقويض نظام من دون أن ينسى أو يغفر العرب الذين يشاركونها هذا الهدف، كل لأسباب مختلفة، صورة التاريخ العثماني وعلاقته بهم بالذات. تركيا مع الربيع العربي، ولكنها تريد خاتمته على صورة تجربتها، وهو ما لا يحمس العرب الآخرين على ملاقاتها. بالتأكيد ليست هناك علاقة بدولة عربية بمثل السوء والتدهور إلى حد المواجهة الوشيكة أو ربما المستبعدة كما بينها وسوريا، لكن هاتين الدولتين قبل سنوات قليلة قدمتا نموذجا فريدا لعلاقات حسن الجوار والتعاون والتبادل الاقتصادي والتفاهم السياسي، ذهب بهما إلى مناورات عسكرية مشتركة قبل سنتين فقط، عام 2009 من أحداث سوريا. كان بينهما أيضا الكثير من الالتباس منذ ثلاثينات القرن الماضي حتى عام 1998 في مشكلات تاريخية ارتبط بعضها بالإقليم والبعض الآخر بالمياه والبعض الثالث بالتلاعب بالنظام. الآن باتتا على الطرفي نقيض مدمر. كيف ينظر إلى تركيا في عالم عربي متغير؟ ذلك هو عنوان الجلسة الأولى التي يتحدث فيها السيدة صبيحة كوندغار عن المؤسسة التركية للدراسات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية تسيف، والسيد مسعود أوزكان عن مركز الأبحاث الاستراتيجية في وزارة الخارجية التركية، والسيد وسيم قلعجي عن منتدى الوسطية. وسيتناول ضيوفنا نتائج استطلاع للرأي العام أجري أخيرا في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا عن كيفية رؤية الناس لتركيا. كذلك سيحاولون الإجابة عن هذين السؤالين: كيف أثرت استجابة تركيا الربيع العربي على صورتها؟ ما هو الوزن النسبي للقضايا الأمنية والسياسية والاقتصادية في نظرة الناس إلى تركيا؟ الكلمة لك السيدة صبيحة.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Also, let me welcome you all here today. And let me thank you once more to Paul Salem, Romy, Robert, and all this team at Carnegie for once more hosting us here in Beirut. We enjoy and benefit from this partnership a lot, and therefore we hope the continuation of this partnership. I'll try to raise some points regarding the change that has been taking place in Turkey and give some highlights from the survey. The copies of this survey that was mentioned by also Mr. Paker was there. I will not go through all the data of the survey. You can find much more in the report, but I'll just share with you some of the highlights. But before that, maybe I have to admit that discussing Turkey and Turkey's relations with the Middle East, discussing how Turkey is perceived in the region, is getting much more difficult since, as the panel of this title notes, Arab world is changing, the Middle East is changing, and at a moment when things are changing so rapidly, sometimes we need to rephrase our phrases, each and every day in order to catch up with the agenda. And these very rapid developments taking place in Turkey's region, each and every new development forces Turkey to take new positions, produce new policies, leave behind the policies that are not working anymore and come up and produce new ones rather quickly. And of course, it also redefines its friends and its non-friends. I mean, we have seen and we are still seeing with the Syria case that Turkey and Syria, as mentioned by the chairperson, had very close relations. They even hold joint parliamentary sessions together. But all of a sudden, because there was a rapid change going on in Syria, Turkey needed to cut all its relations with its neighbors And now we are, it's still an unknown process what's going to happen between Turkey and Syria. And it is escalating even more with the last Friday's downing of the jet crisis. I won't go into details of that, but the point that I want to make is sometimes Turkey is very much applauded because of a position that it takes, and sometimes it is very much criticized. My point is that this is very normal. Things are changing very rapidly. I think Turkey would be criticized much more hardly and harshly if it was just, staying static and not being dynamic. When we have a representative from the foreign ministry and our ambassador here, I'm not the one to defend the foreign policy of Turkey. But if I am to, to call it, I will call it, number one, dynamic, number two, really pragmatic. But however, having said that, I believe that still we are at a very early change of what's going on in the region. It is so early to make any conclusions regarding the future of the region and also the role of Turkey. This is still a process. Hopefully it's going to be a better era of development for all of us, for the region. What we have in hand, I think we have three things concerning Turkey and the region in our hands. Number one, there's an open-ended revolution taking place in the region, and any outside actor has a limited chance of having an impact on the pace of it and on the fate of it. Second, the old system collapsed, and it's not going to come back to the region. This is good news for some, bad news for some others. And concerning Turkey, we have a Turkey in our hands that is much more followed, much more closely, that is under attention, and a country that is still under transformation, also still a process that is in the making. This is both domestically and internationally. I believe what is taking place internationally as far as Turkey's foreign policy is concerned is very much and directly linked what is going on inside of Turkey. So just let me say a couple of words to underline what is going on in Turkey. I think this is since the beginning of 2000s, we are having a completely new historical era in Turkey. Turkey is changing very quickly, and Turkey is changing from bottom to top. And this is happening like the regime is redefining itself in terms of being more inclusive and being more participatory. I am in no way describing the regime in Turkey or describing the system, the democracy we have in Turkey without problems. We have problems. And in certain times, especially these days, we are having some backlashes. But still, I believe that in the recent 2 decades, Turkey moved very quickly to enhance its internal democratization process. There is also a very deep and very rapid change taking place economically and sociologically. And of course, internationally, this is being reflected to its foreign policy as well. Turkey used to isolate itself from most of the global issues, and especially from its region, being the Middle East region. Now, rather than isolating, it's integrating itself with its region. It is not a coincidence that these change inside and outside are parallel. As the gap between the society and its state is getting smaller, Turkey is naturally becoming a more legitimate actor inside and outside. And this is best reflected, I think, in its policies as far as the Middle East is concerned. Mr. Pekan mentioned in his opening remarks, we have been conducting a survey. Now we have it for 3 years. And in this survey, what we are trying to do is to understand how people perceive Turkey, number one, and number two, how people react to what is going on in their region. The first study was conducted in 2009. It showed that it was done in 7 countries. And it found out that there is an average of 75% of respondents have a positive view of Turkey. And this sympathy was repeated in 2010 and in 2011 surveys as well. In 2011 survey, we expanded the scope. It is done in 16 Middle Eastern countries. And the research asked the respondents to state their opinion on 19 countries, both outside and inside of Turkey. Turkey is the only country that got more than 70% of favorable responses, including the ones in Turkey. The second is the Saudi Arabia that follows Turkey. And the most favorable opinion to Turkey comes from Libya, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, and Palestine. And of course, not a surprise, the least favorable opinion comes from Syria and Iran. And Syria is the only exception that gives favorability rate to Turkey with 44%. And I'd like to underline that
There's a clear opinion change in Syria between 2010 and 2011. In 2010, Syria was the #1 country favoring Turkey with 93. In 2011, it's only 44%. But I think this is very understandable and very predictable when we consider it together with what's going on in Syria. And then we wanted to also understand with the survey how people evaluate Turkey's reactions to recent events that have been taking place in the region. In the region average, 64% say that they very much welcome Turkey's reaction to what's going on in the region. Of course, again in Syria and Iran, these are the least positive of Turkey's reactions to what's going on. I won't go into the country details, but if you want, you can, as I said, find them in the report. With the survey, I also would like to underline questions that we asked directly related to Turkey's role. We asked a set of questions. The first one was, we asked the respondents whether they agree with the statement, Turkey has a positive impact on peace in the Middle East. You agree or not? 77% said, yes, we agree. Then we asked whether they agree or not. Turkey has become more influential in the Middle Eastern politics. 70% said yes. And 71% said Turkey should play even a bigger role in the region. 75% said Turkey should play a mediator role in Israel-Palestinian conflict. 61% agrees with the statement that Turkey can be a model for the Middle Eastern countries. 67% see Turkey as a successful combination of Islam and democracy. And 56% consider the impact of Turkey on the so-called Arab Spring positively. Of course, these results are fairly telling, and I don't know whether you would agree, being from the region, you would agree with those or not. And as we say, we need to see the results of the new survey, how the recent initiatives and recent reactions of Turkey are seen. And hopefully we'll be conducting the survey again, and before the end of 2012, we'll have the new data. So we'll be able to fresh the perception of Turkey. But what is surprising and what is, I think, important to underline is that 2 decades ago, these results were even impossible to think about. While I was studying even at the university, there were 2 words used to describe Turkey's relations with the Middle East and with the Arab world. Dislike and antagonism were the most popularly used words. So I mean, here we need to ask the question, there's a real change, there's a rapid change, and what is changing? I don't think I have really time to go into details of, what has been changing in Turkey. I mentioned very briefly. Second thing changing is the Middle East is changing as a region and countries are changing. And the third thing is, of course, the international context is helping Turkey's role. If it weren't Al-Qaeda attacking the US, if Israel wasn't so aggressive in its policies regarding the region, I don't think Turkey would be so much, taking so much attention. And some, especially in the West, tend to explain this as a shift, saying that Turkey is shifting from West to East. And according to them, this shift is justified because the West doesn't want Turkey, and of course they refer to Turkey's EU membership process. I would say that this is far too simplistic, and this is really missing the big macro picture of what is going on in Turkey and in the region. I think till now, Turkey demonstrated very well that it could operate both in West and in the East, and without sacrificing one for the other. And again, I think that Turkey knows very well, as it has been using all the mechanisms in the Mavi Marmara incident and in the recent dumping of the jet crisis. Turkey is a NATO member. And very well knows that, and its NATO membership and its EU candidacy gives it more power and more strength as far as its Middle Eastern politics is concerned. Having said all these, of course, Turkey's foreign policy is not without its limits. It's not without its problems. I think now there are 3 major risks that we have for Turkey's foreign policy. One is, of course, Syria. I think Turkey is even provocations from inside and outside is giving a very good test case with its sound politics when it comes to Syria. Mr. Davutoğlu and Turkey was one of the first countries trying to put together a strong opposition for Bashar Assad to leave. It got some reactions from the West, from the region, and of course it increased expectations from Turkey. But till now, at that time, I remember Davutoğlu saying that if we don't now put together a strong coalition, Mr. Assad will only gain more time and drag his country more into a civil war. And I think now, till now, Turkey has been right in claiming that. Of course, this is still very much open-ended. I don't think Mr. Assad will leave soon. I don't see any signs of his close military army dissolving yet. This is a process, and it is very important that Turkey needs to continue with this sound politics without really feeling the need to answer the very high expectations and provocations. And also, it's not only Syria. Iran, we know very well. Iraq, we know very well. These are two other risk points that Turkey has. Turkey needs to play a very careful, balancing game in order not to put itself in trouble with these two countries. And as I linked Turkey's foreign policy to its domestic politics, I think the ability of domestic politics will give Turkey more flexibility in its foreign politics. And by this I mean internally there are certain steps taken, but there needs to be much more steps to be taken as far as some basic freedoms are concerned. And I think if Turkey fulfills, if Turkey moves to even enhance its democracy, it's going to have a better hand in its foreign policy. Maybe I should stop here. I don't know whether if I over the time that is given to me or not, but I'm happy to answer and discuss with you any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank Carnegie Middle East and also TESE for inviting me to share my views with you. As Ms. Gündar mentioned about the survey carried out by TESE in the last 3 years, I will mainly talk about the background, why TESE and other institutions are making such surveys and why we are talking about Turkish role in the Middle East. This is mainly related with the engagement of Turkey in the last decade with the region. Increasingly in the last decade, we witnessing an increasing role of Turkey in the region, and I will start by talking about the political, economic and cultural reasons of it. In the last decade, we see increasing political relations with neighboring countries, and Turkey established several political dialogue mechanisms with the neighboring regions. And the reason for this was in the 1990s, Turkey had several problems with its neighbors, with the neighboring regions, and in order to overcome such problems, Turkey wanted to establish good political, economic and cultural relations with the neighboring countries. And this change started with 1999 in my analysis, and the main reasons of this change was the decline of security threat against Turkey with the capture of Öcalan, the leader of PKK, and also with the EU candidature of Turkey. And in the last decade, as a result of these changes, Turkey introduced several mechanisms to increase its engagement with its neighborhood. And in that respect, Turkey established political dialogue with Syria, with Iraq, with Iran, with Russia, with Georgia, with Greece, and some other countries. So Turkish engagement with neighboring regions is not only related with the Middle East, but also with its other neighbors. In relation to this political dialogue, Turkey also increased economic relations with the neighboring countries, and Middle East was a good example here. Turkey signed several free trade agreements with the neighboring countries. For example, Turkey signed free trade agreements with Syria, with Egypt, with Lebanon, with Jordan, and the main aim here is to increase economic relations with the neighboring regions. And the main logic behind this was a country which wants to develop its economy should have good economic relations with neighboring countries. And the share of the Middle Eastern countries in foreign trade of Turkey increased dramatically in the last decade. And for example, as a recent data show, Iraq is now the second biggest trading partner of Turkey after Germany. This was not the case 10 years ago. Although Iraq was an important trading partner for Turkey for several years, now Iraq became the second biggest trading partner of Turkey. And this trade relations with the neighboring countries also provided a good atmosphere of political relations, so these are supporting each other. And in order to support this political and economic relations, Turkey also established visa-free regimes with the neighboring countries. And the main aim here is to contribute to this economic development, to this economic relations, but at the same time to enable people in Turkey and also in the region to better know each other. So this was the main mentality behind Turkish foreign policy in the last decade. And during this last decade, Turkey was also in favor of a gradual change in our region. As Ms. Sabiha mentioned during her talk, in Turkey there were also some reforms, some political reforms, some economic reforms, and also Turkish policymakers argued that we also need some kind of reforms in our region, in the Middle East. For example, I remember current Turkish president, when he was foreign minister, he and other policymakers were also talking about need of reform in our region in OIC meetings and other regional meetings. So the main argument of Turkey, there is a need of change, but this should be a gradual change because, and also this should come from the grassroots. And for this reason, the current Arab Spring is interpreted by the Turkish foreign policy makers as a natural development of change, because there was a need of change, there was demand, so these demands came out of this need. And as a result of this engagement, we see rising economic and foreign policy profile of Turkey in this region, and because of this rising profile, now we are talking about Turkish role, we are carrying out some surveys to assess this role. What about the Arab Spring, how these developments affected the view of people on Turkey and Turkish foreign policy in the region? From the beginning, Turkish policymakers said that they will stand with the demands of the people. The rulers of the regimes in the region should respect and respond to the demands of the people. These demands are genuine demands, and when we look the demands of the people, they are asking for democracy, they are asking for better government, they are asking for accountability. So a government which is pursuing a similar agenda in its domestic policy should also respond, should also support these demands in the region. So this policy is in line with the Turkish domestic policy in the last decade. And the opposite was unthinkable, because you cannot support democratization, transformation in your own country, but resist the same demands in your region. And the Turkish expectation with the Arab Spring is, when more democratic and accountable governments come to power in that region, then it will create a better environment in which Turkey will cooperate with the neighboring regions, because cooperation, economic cooperation, political cooperation is good for the neighboring countries. So as an accountable government, in each state in our region will ask more cooperation with Turkey and with other countries in the region, and this will create a positive atmosphere in our region for the peace and stability. And in this Arab Spring, for many people, Turkish economic and political transformation constitute a good example. This is also shown by TESEV's survey, but also with some other surveys. When people are asked in the Middle East about Turkey, they always argue functioning of Turkish economy, functioning of Turkish political systems, the quality of services provided by the state, and also the functioning of the state institutions, other institutions. So there is a positive image, and this image is not only limited to state institutions, but also Turkish civil society, but also Turkish business organizations. So this, in a complete picture, Turkish example constitutes a good example for the region, for the peoples of the region. And when people are asked about Turkish response to the Arab Spring, as Ms. Sabiha mentioned, there is a general positive response, with some reservations in Syria and also with some reservations in Libya in the beginning. But generally, Turkish policy regarding the Arab Spring is perceived as positive by many people in the region. And for example, even there were some criticisms against Turkey regarding Syria. Some other people are saying that Turkey is providing shelter for the Syrian people, and this is a good example of friendship, this is a good example of brotherhood, and even some not Arab countries is providing that good example. And lastly, I will talk about the political, economic and security issues of view of Turkey in the region. And the main reasons why Turkey is perceived as a positive example in the region is the political transformation taking place in Turkey. As I mentioned, after being a candidate to the European Union, Turkey introduced several reforms to democratize its society, Turkey introduced some constitutional changes, and now there is a debate in Turkey to write a new constitution to respond to demands. So there is a ongoing transformation, political transformation in Turkey, and this is a good example, and this is perceived as a positive example in the region. And the democratic consolidation in Turkey is also a good example. The relation between civilian and military relations, the change in the civilian-military relations is perceived as a positive in the region, and many commentators, political analysts in the region see this transformation as a positive signal, positive example for the region. And the relationship between Islam and democracy is seen by many people as a good example, especially given the changes taking place after the Arab Spring and the rise of Islamic movements in the region. Many people think that the Islamic movements in the region should imitate or should also follow the Islamic movements in Turkey. So this is a good example for the region as well in the future. From the point of economic development, in the last decade Turkey had a continuous economic growth, and the per capita income in 2002 was around $3,000, but now it's around $13,000. So there is a huge economic development, and this is Turkey is still, despite the financial crisis all over the world, Turkey is doing well in terms of its economic development in comparison with other countries, and Turkish engagement with the neighboring countries provided a good opportunity for Turkey to overcome at least some of the negative effects of this financial crisis. As I mentioned, with the decline of Turkish exports to Europe, now Middle Eastern countries increasingly becoming trade partner of Turkey. Iraq is an example here, and also some other countries in the region are becoming more and more important for Turkey in terms of its trade relations. And when it is asked about Turkish products, Turkish economic activity, Turkish products are described as good products, quality products, with competitive prices, and the services, the Turkish services are also seen as good services, quality services, and Turkish companies and Turkish products are analyzed and seen as good products. And from the point of security issues, lastly, Turkey is paying attention to the problems of the region, especially the Palestinian issue, the developments in Iraq, the developments in our region. Before the Arab Spring, Turkey was very much paying attention to these issues, and after the Arab Spring, Turkey is trying to affect these developments taking place in the region. As I mentioned, since Turkey is transforming itself, is also supporting the transformation taking place in our region. Because, as I mentioned in the beginning, the changes taking place in the region is towards democracy. People are asking for more rights. They are asking for accountable governments. And the position of Turkey is supporting this change in a gradual, in a peaceful manner. But sometimes it's not under the control of any country, and sometimes we have peaceful transition, as in the case of Tunisia, but sometimes we have a more difficult situation, more difficult conditions, as in the case of Syria. But the main premises of Turkish foreign policy regarding this development is supporting the change, supporting the demands of the people, and trying to convince the current regimes to come with some reform agenda, to move forward towards more democracy, towards more accountability. And this is, in the long run and also in the near future, this will be the main premise of Turkish foreign policy regarding this Arab Spring. Thank you.
الكلمة الأستاذ وسيم قلعجي.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أتود أن أتوجه بالشكر إلى الجهات المنظمة لهذه الندوة ولإتاحة الفرصة لي للتحدث. أنا ما سأقدمه هو مجموعة أفكار على قاعدة الوسطية، أي أن كلامي صواب يحتمل الخطأ، وهي رؤية لا تلزم أحدا فيما تحتويه من أفكار. لقد مثل فوز حزب العدالة والتنمية بالانتخابات البرلمانية في العام 2002 بهويته الواضحة نقطة تحول كبيرة في سياسة تركيا الخارجية حيال العالمين العربي والإسلامي. وإذا كانت الدول تبني سياستها الإقليمية على ركائز معلومة تقوم على التحالفات الدولية، الموقع الجغرافي، الروابط التاريخية، الإمكانات البشرية والقوة الاقتصادية، فإن الروابط التاريخية مع العالمين العربي والإسلامي لعبت دورها في تكوين أهم العوامل المساعدة في رسم السياسة الإقليمية للدولة التركية. لقد حسمت حكومات العدالة والتنمية في تركيا مسألة الهوية في مدركات الدولة لنفسها في مواجهة محيطها الجغرافي، وأيضا في تشكيل الهوية الحضارية من خلال تحديد القيم لدى النظام السياسي التركي وانتخابه الحاكمة. ومن هنا لابد من التنويه بدور الكبير لحزب العدالة والتنمية على خلفية وضوح مسألة الهوية لديه في فتح آفاق التلاقي وإزالة العقبات أمام عودة تركيا إلى العالم العربي. هذا المدخل ضروري لفهم الدور التركي تركيا التي يفهم قادتها تفاصيل تضاريس الجيوسياسية في الشرق الأوسط، مثل ما يفهم قادتها أيضا عقلية وطريقة تفكير العرب والمسلمين. تركيا تعمل الآن لكي تعود كقوة إقليمية مؤثرة في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وفي العالم العربي والإسلامي وفي المحيط الاستراتيجي للبحر الأسود صعودا نحو البحر الأبيض المتوسط. وهذا ما شجع القيادة التركية لتكون شريكا رئيسيا لهندسة ما يسمى بالربيع العربي الذي أسس لمرحلة جديدة تتناغم فيها السياسة الخارجية التركية مع السياسات الدولية. العوامل الكامنة برأيي لتنامي نفوذ تركيا في الشرق الأوسط تنقسم إلى 5. العامل الأول هو الرغبة والانفتاح التركي على العالم العربي، ومن أدل الأمثلة على ذلك أن يوجه الرئيس رجب طيب أردوغان من شرفة مقر حزب العدالة والتنمية في أنقرة تحياته إلى العالم العربي، إلى بيروت وتونس والقاهرة والرباط وإلى كل العالم العربي، ويهدي هذا الانتصار ويعتبرهم شركاء معه في هذا الانتصار. إضافة إلى ذلك نستطيع أن نفهم هذا الإهداء هو من باب ازدياد انخراط تركيا في شؤون الشرق الأوسط بفضل استخدامها القوة الناعمة. ومثال على ذلك هو الجدال العلني بين الرئيس أردوغان والرئيس الإسرائيلي بيريز في دافوس، حادث أسطول الحرية في مرمرة، ودعم تركيا للحراك العربي الثوري. النقطة الثانية هي أن مكان العرب والعالم العربي في السياسة الخارجية التركية. العرب في السياسة الخارجية التركية نحن لسنا بدلا عن ضائع. كان في الحديث يتحدث سابقا من أن تركيا يئست الانتظار على باب الاتحاد الأوروبي، وأن الاتحاد الأوروبي لا يصغي إلى تركيا، وأن هذه الدينامية الإيجابية في اتجاه العالم العربي تريد من خلالها تركيا أن تبين أهميتها وموقعها الاستراتيجي حتى تنضم إلى الاتحاد الأوروبي. أنا أعتقد أن تطورات منذ 10 سنوات حتى الآن أثبتت أن هناك مكان أساسي للعرب وللعالم العربي في السياسة الخارجية التركية، وكما قلت نحن لسنا بدلا عن ضائع. النقطة الثالثة التي تكتسب أهمية هي أن تركيا تعرف أن لا مكان لها في الشرق الأوسط إن لم تكن إلى جانب قضايا الشعوب العربية. وعمود هذا يعني نقطة ارتكاز الشعوب العربية هي القضية الفلسطينية. لذلك نرى بأن هناك تحركا تركيا قويا في اتجاه دعم القضية العربية، وفي اتجاه مصالحة الفلسطينية، وفي اتجاه محاولة توسط من أجل إقامة دولة فلسطينية وحماية الشعب الفلسطيني ومكوناته. النقطة الرابعة التي أراها ضرورية هي حاجة العرب إلى تركيا. التطورات السياسية في العالم العربي أوجدت فراغ استراتيجي يبدأ بانهيار عملية السلام الإسرائيلية عام 2000 والنزاع الفلسطيني، الاجتياح الأمريكي للعراق، صعود إيران قوة إقليمية، الانقسامات العربية. هذا كله أدخل العالم العربي القرن 21 مع شعور عميق بأنه في أزمة. يحاول العالم العربي ومن خلفه الغرب وبطريقة ناعمة أن يضع تركيا في مواجهة إيران وطموحاتها، الاستراتيجية في الشرق الأوسط والعالم العربي، خصوصا بعدما وجدت أغلبية الدول العربية نفسها شبه أسيرة أمام إيران في العراق وسوريا ولبنان والبحرين وفي الخليج العربي. كما أن معظم هذا البحر السني يرى في تركيا أنها تستطيع أن تتوسط في منع قيام فتنة سنية شيعية في العالم العربي، وأن حالة التوازن التي قد تشكلها تركيا في منطق دبلوماسي حقيقي يستطيع أن يزيل فتيل هذه الفتنة من العالم العربي. أخيرا طبعا الرؤية الاقتصادية ورؤية الانفتاح الاقتصادية، إزالة تأشيرات الدخول إلى تركيا المتبادلة ومحاولة قيام التكامل الاقتصادي، محاولة إيجاد ما يسمى الاتحاد الرباعي بين تركيا وسوريا ولبنان والأردن. طبعا هذا كان له تأثير ممتاز على صورة تركيا في العالم العربي. أنا أريد أن أتحدث أيضا بشكل مختصر عن رؤية العالم العربي لدور تركيا فيما يسمى بالربيع العربي. لا شك أن بداية تعاطي تركيا مع الربيع العربي كان هناك كان مصاب بحالة ارتباك حتى في البداية، ونقول بأنه يعني كان هناك سياسة مركبة، سياسة خارجية تركية مركبة تعاملت مع كل دولة على حدة. الثابت في المتابع لمواقف التركية من الثورات العربية يشعر بأن هناك إحساس تركي بوجود فائض ثقة بالنفس في التعامل مع ما يجري في العالم العربي، وهذا نابع من كون الرغبة في إدخال تركيا إلى العالم العربي وعودتها. لكن نشعر بأن تركيا تصدت لملفات كبيرة قد تكون في بعض الأحيان أقوى من إمكاناتها، لذلك انعكس هذا الأمر ببعض أوجهه فشلا في إدارة هذه الملفات، وخصوصا هذا الفشل قد يكون أحد أسبابه هو رهان تركيا على إمكانية التغلغل الإحادي الجانب في المنطقة العربية، وأن تكون هي وحدها اللاعب المركزي والوحيد بدون منافسين جديين، مما يتعارض مع التوازنات الحساسة القائمة في المنطقة، خصوصا أن هناك إذا كان هذا الأمر سيتم من بوابة التعاون مع السياسات الدولية. أنا لا أريد أن أتطرق إلى الدينامية الإيجابية للموقف التركي من العملية السياسية في تونس والمغرب، ولا إلى اضطرار تركيا لمراعاة توجهات مجلس دول التعاون الخليجي في الدعوة إلى تلبية مطالب المحقة لشعبي اليمن والبحرين، ولا إلى الموقف المتوازن الذي قدمه الرئيس رجب طيب أردوغان للحالة الثورية المصرية، وهذا التوجه الذي أثبت مصداقيته مع تطور الأحداث حاليا في مصر. ولكن المسألة الأكثر جدلا هما الموقف مما كان يجري في ليبيا وما يجري حاليا في سوريا، وأنا أعتقد أنه يتطلب إعادة قراءة ودراسة من جديد. فيما يتعلق بهذه الموقفين هناك من يطرح علامات استفهام كثيرة حول ما إذا كانت السياسة الخارجية التركية أمام منعطف جديد عنوانه الانقلاب على سياسة الانفتاح السابقة التي سادت مع وصول حزب العدالة والتنمية إلى السلطة عام 2002، وهل ينسجم كل ما قامت به تركيا مع السياسة الخارجية التي قدمها معالي الوزير الأستاذ أحمد داود أوغلو. الأستاذ أحمد داود أوغلو يرى أن على تركيا أن تعيش في محيط مستقر، وبالتالي عليها أن تسعى إلى تخفيض المشكلات مع محيطها إلى نقطة الصفر، وهو ما عرف بسياسة تصفير المشاكل. هذا المعطى يشكل جوهر القوة التركية الجديدة المستندة إلى محيط استراتيجي يجب أن يكون مستقر بالضرورة. ما الذي تغير في العالم العربي؟ هل تغير المحيط المستقر أم تغيرت سياسة تصفير المشاكل؟ سقوط عامل المحيط المستقر قد دفع بتركيا إلى أن ترى نفسها طرفا من حقه أن يتدخل في الشؤون الداخلية للبلدان العربية من منطلق أن استقرارها يهم تركيا، وأن تركيا وهذه حقيقة تصدي النصائح لا الإملاءات، حتى أن الرئيس رجب طيب أردوغان اعتبر أن ما يجري في سوريا مثلا يشكل جزءا من السياسة الداخلية لتركيا وليس من سياستها الخارجية. أنا أعتقد أن هذا الموضوع بحاجة إلى القراءة. حتى أختم أريد أن أطرح سؤالا أرى أنه الآن هو في موقعه الحقيقي. ماذا تريد تركيا من العالم العربي؟ وماذا يريد العالم العربي من تركيا؟ هذا السؤال كل الاستطلاعات التي تمت في السابق لم تجب على هذا السؤال. أنا أريد أن أقول أنه لا بد أن نستخلص العبر من الربيع العربي. الدور التركي في المنطقة يأتي في أوانه لدعم تحرير الشعوب هذه المنطقة مما تزرع تحته منذ سنوات طويلة من ظلم حكام جائرين ومستبدين. مقاربة تركيا الجديدة للسياسة الخارجية بعد حراك الثورات العربية يعتمد على فرضيتين. الأولى هي أن الشعوب العربية قد حسمت أمرها في طلب التغيير، والثانية أن هذا التغيير يصب في مصلحة تركيا، وبناء عليه فإن تركيا تراهن على قدرات الشعوب العربية في صناعة قدرها، وتركيا جاهزة لتتكيف مع رغبات هذه الشعوب. في ذات الوقت الذي تسعى فيه قوى التغيير في العالم العربي إلى محاكاة النموذج التركي الذي يقوم برأيه على 3 ركائز: التحول الديمقراطي، التنمية الاقتصادية، وسياسة خارجية تصدر الحلول. لذلك لا بد من إعادة رسم سياسة خارجية لتركيا تتناغم مع منظومات الخيارات الاستراتيجية للأنظمة العربية الجديدة بكاملها. من باب صديقك من صدقك قول وليس من صدقك أقول أن الشعوب العربية لديها طلبين من تركيا. الأول، الشعوب العربية لا تريد من تركيا أن تتدخل في خياراتها السياسية، ولكنها تريد من تركيا السعي لحل أزماتها السياسية. الشعوب العربية لا تريد من تركيا أن تكون هي عامل التغيير في المجتمعات العربية، لكنها تريد من تركيا أن تدعم التحولات العميقة في المجتمعات العربية. وشكرا.
أستاذ وسيم لا أوكي. أعلن ختم الجلسة الأولى وأكرر اعتذاري عن الوقت الطويل الذي استغرقته.
السلام عليكم. In this panel, as it is mentioned, we will discuss the Turkish policy in a volatile neighborhood, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. I have some words before I give the floor to the participant, to the if there is any adventurism, any level of adventurism in AKP or Rajab Tayyip Erdogan new politics after the birth of Arab Spring, the space of this possible adventurism is Syria and Iraq. Not Egypt, from other perspective, not Egypt, not Tunisia, not even Libya, where the Turk, as you know, had a huge economical and job opportunity losses in the beginning of the change, of the process of change in Libya. Even there, it happened in Libya for once and forever. But in Syria and Iraq, this space have many risks for the Turks, for this politics of Turkey. Now, the new element is the military escalation and perhaps involvement. One of the most important, in my view, of the most important risk, not from moral point of view, is the sectarian, internally and regionally involvement of Turkey. And I'm not talking morally here. I'm talking, in my view, as a believer in the real capacity of the Turkish model for our countries with S. in economy, in modernization, and in democratization. In Syria and Iraq, the direct neighborhood of Turkey will threaten this Turkish model because this is the Islam that could be presented by Turkey as modernity versus sectarian involvement. So, second, between the Iranian model and the Saudian, I will not say model, and the Saudian reality, we don't need another Saudi Arabia nor another Iran. Let me be frank here. So Turkey in Syria and Iraq, I'm not talking about Egypt. This is something different, and we will discuss perhaps later, because Egypt has other capacities. In Syria and Iraq, the sectarian risk threatens one of the main capacity of the Turkish model as a modernizing model of our economy and our democracy. For me, this is the level of tackling this subject. Not only don't let Sunni beat Shia and Shia beat Sunni. No, no, no. This is something, in my view, more important than that, than the simple sectarian conflict. And third risk is, of course, the economical risk. We need perhaps from our Turkish colleague to tell us exactly in commercial level, especially that Turkey has, as I know, one main economical problem is, as you know, the commercial deficit. So I hope that our Turkish colleague can give us an idea about the Turkish losses in commercial relation with Syria and Iraq this year. And of course, on investment, in spite of the Turkish real success in the Kurdish region in North Iraq economically. So that's what I wanted to emphasize, to focus on. And perhaps later we will have the opportunity to have answers on two main questions from our Turkish colleague. The first is to what extent this new politics, it is a Prime Minister Erdogan policy or mainstream AKP. I will not talk about the diplomatic bureaucracy or the military. This is more spread debate and more complicated. The second question, after the huge change in the internal context, the balance of power or the mechanism of power inside Turkey, and the real achievement toward a civilian state, not a deep state, as the Turks like to call. To what extent the military is ready to be involved in a regional conflict, except, of course, the case, the old case and the classical case of the PKK position in northern Iraq. I hope that we will have time to have answers about those two questions. And now I give the floor to Mr. Shaban Kardash from the Top Economy and Technology University. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I will try to come back to your questions perhaps at the end of my own presentation, but before I start mine, let me emphasize that in the first session, at the end of the first session, there were some questions on the Turkish perceptions of the Arabs. At the SETA Foundation, they carried out a public survey in Turkey. For those who are interested, you could visit their website and you could find the results of that survey. Also, several other Turkish think tanks carried out surveys on Turkish public's perceptions of the government's Middle East policy. You could find several indications of that, but as far as I know, there is only one real survey carried out on Turkish perceptions of the Arabs and Arab world. This is the one which I just mentioned. I was planning to address the three questions that are posed in the program. The first one, what are the main elements of Turkish policy towards its eastern and southern neighbors? Second one, has a new strategy replaced Turkey's zero problems policy? The third one is, how have events in Syria affected Ankara's relations with Iran and Iraq? The discussion in the first session partly touched on the first question, so there were several indications of Turkey's policy, what undergird Turkish foreign policy toward the Middle East, but I will also share with you my own take on that, and I will discuss the second and third questions as well. When we talk about Turkey's Middle East policy, I do not like the term Turkey's Middle East policy or neo-Ottomanism or other terms, but I rather prefer to talk about either Turkey's regional policies in plural or Turkey's neighborhood policies. The reason why I tend to use those terms is what we might call multi-regional identity and multi-regional character of Turkish foreign policy, given that Turkey is part of several regions simultaneously, including the Balkans, the Black Sea, the Caucasus, and the Middle East. It is more helpful and useful to talk about overall regional policies of Turkey than Turkey's regional policies in a specific region. So in that sense, I am one of those who believe that Turkey's policies in the Middle East in many ways share the similar characteristics to Turkey's policies in the Balkans or the Black Sea or the Caucasus. So in that sense, we need to first understand the principles that underlie Turkish regional policies, Turkey's neighborhood policies, before we start to discuss Turkey's policies in a specific region. There are, of course, unique characteristics of Turkey's regional policies in the Middle East, but there are those general themes, general principles which have to be understood first. Having said that, let me emphasize that I will come to those principles later. And then as far as we talk about the Middle East, the unique regional context of the Middle East, especially in the current juncture, current context, as far as I see, I can identify at least four major processes or trends that are affecting the transformations and the direction of Turkish foreign policy. The first is Turkey's increasing drift towards Middle Eastern geopolitics, especially balances of power, very local dynamics, as in the case of Iraq, as in the case of Syria, as in the case of Iran. Turkey is increasingly being drifted toward the ever-changing, ever-shifting local balances of power, which is affecting Turkey's foreign policy to a great extent. The second trend is the growing emphasis Turkey puts on values, especially democracy, in the making of its foreign policy. So in that sense, we can talk about a shift away from what I call economic liberalism toward political liberalism. I mean, it has been discussed so far that economic aspect has been one of the main dimensions of Turkish foreign policy. Turkey's opening to the Middle East, Turkey's engagement with the Middle East was driven by economic considerations, but increasingly we see that political considerations in terms of human rights, democracy, good governance are also becoming more and more visible in the parlance of Turkish foreign policy makers. So to what extent this is rhetoric or pragmatism, it's a different question, but at least when you read closely Turkish statesmen, their statements on different issues, you see increasing emphasis on values, political values. The third trend or process is what I call Turkey's redefinition of its ties to the West. Especially the United States and NATO is becoming more important here. And in that sense, especially compared to a couple of years back, rather than maintaining controversial or confrontational policies with the United States, Turkey is increasingly coordinating and acting in concert with the United States, and this is having immense implications for Turkey's relations with the regional actors. I guess the best case to study that effect, the implications of that trend is Turkey's relationship with Iran, which I will also address later. The fourth and the last, but not least, trend is what I call the drift toward coercive instruments in the making of Turkish foreign policy. I mean, it has been emphasized also in the first panel, Turkey has in the last couple of years prided itself as a country that thrives on soft power, non-coercive instruments, but increasingly in the last year, or at least since the beginning of the Arab Spring, we see that in addition to soft power instruments, Turkey is in one way or another resorting or being forced to resort to coercive instruments. So it raises the issue of whether Turkey is pursuing brinkmanship or other types of policies vis-à-vis its neighbors. And this is also at the core of this second question posed by the organizers, whether Turkey's zero-problem policy has been replaced by a different policy. And this drift toward coercive instruments has to be studied carefully as well. Again, as I said at the beginning, in order to understand Turkey's changing dynamics in the Middle East, I will briefly talk about this regional policy or neighborhood policy of Turkey, and then I will discuss the implications of the Arab Spring for those regional policies. And again, as I said, since it was largely covered in the first session, I will try to keep my comments as short as possible. I mean, there are different ways to explain, there are different theoretical frameworks to explain Turkey's regional policies, neighborhood policies, but I tend to call Turkey's regional policies as a policy of region building or regionalization. So in that sense, what Turkey is trying to accomplish in the Middle East or the Balkans or the Black Sea is not any different from many other processes of regionalization taking place in other parts of the world. So in that sense, it's a very secular trend in world politics. We see that there are rising powers in different parts of the globe, and global economy, global political balances are shifting, and then you see in different parts of the globe there are processes, regional integration processes. So in this sense, what Turkey has been trying to accomplish in its own neighborhoods is very similar, in the sense that Turkey is trying to develop regional mechanisms in partnership with its neighbors to solve regional problems by the participation of regional actors. So in that sense, the instruments Turkey developed prior to the Arab Spring, such as using trade, as emphasized by Mesut Özcan, or such as using political dialogue, mediation, engagement, soft power, cultural diplomacy, several other instruments, they were meant to create a greater level of integration, interaction among the regional powers so that economic, social, cultural ties are enhanced, and there is also some degree of political cooperation among the regional actors. So in that sense, as I said, like to call Turkey's regional policies as a policy of region or region building or order instituting. And in that sense, Arab Spring and post-Arab Spring developments have been a major test for Turkey's regional policies. In that sense, the Arab Spring has brought about many challenges to Turkey's regional policies, and in a sense, the Arab Spring and the related challenges demonstrated to what extent Turkey is capable or willing to pursue and maintain the same regional policies. Here, I like to point out to two different effects of the Arab Spring to Turkey's regional policies. The first one is the fact that the Arab Spring and the related challenges presented and revealed and demonstrated the limitations of Turkey's regional vision. The second effect is the changing nature of the regional order and especially growing salience of security threats in the region and their effects on Turkey's foreign policy priorities. The first one, the limitations which were revealed by the Arab Spring are the following. With the Arab Spring, as far as I can say, there has been many arguments as to whether Turkey has emerged from that challenge as a successful state, whether Turkey is the loser or the winner. For instance, you hear some arguments, for instance, especially in the US think tank community. Back in May 2011, Stephen Cook wrote a commentary. He called it Arab Spring Turkish Fall, trying to sort of criticize Turkey's foreign policy. So personally, I am one of those who think that it's too early to judge whether Turkey is emerging from that process as on the...
For the translation, it's better to speak slowly. Better.
Okay, then.
It's for your interest.
Okay, thanks. I am one of those who think that it is too early to judge because the process itself is changing very fast and Turkey itself is trying to adjust its priorities. So in that sense, in many ways, I think that Turkish foreign policy has been successfully adjusting, but in many ways there are also several shortcomings. The major shortcoming in my eyes is the fact that the Arab Spring demonstrated the limits of Turkey's ability to understand and foresee Middle Eastern developments. So in that sense, although Turkey has had a vision toward the Middle East, the inability to predict and the inability to know the local dynamics was revealed by the developments. And the second important limitation is Turkey's recognition of the poor status of poor stand of regional capacities to develop regional solutions. Turkey initially, when the Arab Spring started in the case of Syria, in the case of Libya, Turkey's preference was to solve the problem at the local level with the participation of the local actors. For instance, in the case of Libya, Turkey initially said no to NATO intervention, but later Turkey had to coordinate its policy with the international actors, with the United States, NATO and European actors. To me, it shows that there is very limited regional capacity building toward developing regional solutions, and this is one of the acknowledgements for Turkey, and this is also one of the reasons why Turkey is now trying to re-coordinate its policies with the West. And the second dimension, the changing nature of threats in the region, the growing salience of security risks in the Middle East and how they affect Turkish foreign policy. And before the Arab Spring, there was a relatively stable regional order in the Middle East. At least you know who the partners were, so you could develop your relationships. For instance, in the first panel, there was a question to Turkish participants about why Turkey chose to work with Assad, or why Turkey chose to work with Gaddafi. You know that these are the guys, your interlocutors, you have to work with them if you want to get certain results. If you want to expand your trade, if you want to penetrate into the Middle East, these are the guys with whom you should work with. So in that sense, there was some predictability. So in that sense, Turkey was pursuing this policy. I don't call it a policy, but most people call it a policy. Zero problems with neighbors, because the leaders, the rulers, had some legitimacy in the eyes of their people, and they could also carry on, they could also deliver on their promises. But now with the region in flux, the regional dynamics shifting, and the regional actors are changing, and in the case of Libya, for instance, Turkey experienced the implications of that development. You have to make hard choices as to who will be your future partners. So in this increasingly dynamic region with shifting alignments, Turkey is also being forced to engage in local dynamics. This is one of the reasons why Turkey's relationship with Iran, Turkey's relationship with Iraq, and several actors in Iraq and also in Syria are in flux. And then in this changing dynamic Middle Eastern regional order, I think the security risks and security threats are becoming ever more important, and this is also why Turkey is now being forced to work even closely with NATO and the United States, and this is why, for instance, Turkey decided to go with the United States with the missile shield project, which put Turkey in confrontation with, for instance, Iran. And the other dimension here is Turkey's emphasis on democracy, which was also discussed in the first panel. And this emphasis on democracy is, I guess, related to one of the principles of Turkish foreign policy, which was developed by Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu. Many people like to talk about the zero problems with neighbors principle, but Davutoğlu in 2003-2004 formulated the idea of a central power. He defines Turkey as a central power, and that central power foreign policy has 5 principles. The first principle was the balance between freedoms and security. The second principle was zero problems with neighbors. Everybody used to talk about the second principle, but they forgot that actually the first principle was this principle that foresees the balance between freedoms and security, which more or less, which means democracy. Now, since the threat to the regional order comes from internal instability in several regions, instead of the second principle, we see Turkey is putting more and more emphasis on the first principle, which is the balance between security and democracy. The idea here is that in the literature on regions, regional orders, for instance, they talk about the necessity of having stable domestic orders in order to have stable regional orders. I think Turkey is operating from the same conceptual framework here, and Turkey believes that in order to create a stable Middle Eastern regional order, first there needs to be stable domestic orders, and this is the reason why I think Turkey is putting a lot of emphasis on democracy, because democracy is seen as a shortcut to good governance and stable domestic regimes. So in that sense, responding to the second question, has a new strategy replaced Turkey's zero problems policy? I think no new strategy has replaced Turkey's zero problems policy, because zero problems was only a principle. The strategy was a central country strategy, and Turkey still pursues the same strategy toward the Middle East. Turkey still pursues the same neighborhood policy. The shift is on the emphasis on principles, not the strategy. Turkey's regional vision remains still the same. I will briefly talk about the third question. How have events in Syria affected Ankara's relations with Iran and Iraq? And I don't need to go into detail about Turkey's policy on Syria. It is already covered here. Most people here probably know what's going on. And it's also known that Turkey's policy on Syria drove a wedge between Turkey and Iran. But in order to understand the recent tensions between Turkey and Iran, we have to move beyond the Syria case. Syria is one of the reasons why Turkey and Iran are on different page. But there are also other reasons why they are diverging these days, especially the growing tensions between Iran and the West, and Turkey's growing alignment toward the United States and the West is another source of tension here. I don't need to go into details, but especially the missile defense issue, Iranian nuclear issue, and related to that, the sanctions issue. These are the actual issues that are creating tensions between Turkey and Iran. Regarding Iraq, again, there are certain ramifications, implications from Syria, but still there are also other reasons why Turkey is having some problems in its relationship with Iraq. In the case of Iraq, Turkey's main concern is about the current leader Maliki's policies, especially its attempts to consolidate power at the expense of other groups, and its inability to maintain the coalition. And especially, you know that Turkey is hosting Hashimi in Turkey, and Turkey is in this process moving closer to Iraqi Kurds. So if there are questions, we could come back to that. You had several questions to me. Shall I respond to them now, or maybe during the Q&A session?
It's up to you. It's up to you. You can go.
Economic risks of the Arab Spring. As far as I'm not an economist by training, you mentioned the issue of trade deficit. This is one of the chronic problems of Turkish economy, and especially in recent years, Turkey has pursued an economic policy of trying to increase exports. But Turkey realized that the growth in exports came with a growth in imports. So it means that Turkey's economic growth, growing volume of exports need a growing volume of imports, which is largely because Turkey needs intermediary goods to produce end products. Especially here, the dependence on foreign energy sources is making up the huge part of Turkey's trade deficit. Turkey, in order to overcome this problem, is trying to diversify its energy partners and also trying to develop domestic energy policies. For instance, Turkey is investing in nuclear energy, things like that, to reduce dependence on imported energy sources. But in addition to that, Turkey is trying to diversify the line of products. It needs to produce other products. For instance, Turkey is trying to increase domestic input in the production process to cut its reliance on imports. This is also part of the current economic strategy. And but going back to your question about the implications of the Arab Spring for Turkey's regional trade, I guess the most immediate implication was for Turkey's trade with Syria, which was affected to a large extent. But beyond that, as far as I know, Turkey's direct trade with Syria was not making up a huge part of Turkey's overall foreign trade balance. But Syria was important in terms of transportation routes for Turkish exports to the Middle East. Now Turkey is using alternative lines to diversify its export lines to the Middle East. Now there are Ro-Ro transfers between Mersin and Egypt. Turkey is using other ways to bypass Syria, but it is, as far as I know, increasing the costs by 10 to 15% transportation costs. Of course, this is also important. With Iraq, I don't know if there are major drops, but as far as I know, the trade is continuing steady with Iraq. The question you asked, to what extent this new politics or policy is Erdogan's policy or mainstream policy? I mean, could you elaborate the question a little bit?
The personal impact of Mr. Erdogan is fundamental that Turkey, that push Turkey to this involvement, or this is more, which I think, this is my, but we need to ask that, is more a mainstream thoughts
Okay.
inside AKP first, at least, to not talk about the diplomatic bureaucracy and
Okay.
the military.
Okay, to me it is
And
definitely...
you can answer this question, and then we change.
Okay.
And we
To me-
keep the other for
Okay.
the...
To me, it is largely a policy that is accepted inside the party as well as by large segments of the society. It is not an individual policy at all. I mean, for instance, in the first session, one of the speakers referred to Prime Minister's balcony speech after the election victory. Actually, in that speech, he talks about the Middle East, also the Balkans and other regions as well. It reflects what I just mentioned earlier, that he has a multi-regional vision, and that vision is very much similar to, for instance, what Foreign Minister Davutoğlu has written in his academic writings. And when you talk to Turkish decision makers from different angles, you see similar vision. So I don't think it's a personal policy. The Prime Minister himself might add a personal touch to it with his own style of politics, with his way of approaching things and handling issues. But the idea, this regional policy or neighborhood policy which I outlined, is shared by many people inside Turkey.
Thank you. Before I give Mrs. Maria Fontappi, as an Italian, I should congratulate you for the success of yesterday over Germany. It was a wonderful match. So, Mrs. Maria Fontappi from Carnegie Middle East Center in Beirut. So, please.
I wish you could congratulate me for other things rather than this one, especially regarding Italian politics, which is...
And economy.
Yeah, which is quite worrying. So. Thank you very much for your comments, and I will be focusing more on the last question, which is how have events in Syria affected Ankara relationship with Iraq. So rather than having an all overview of Turkish foreign policy, which is quite difficult to do, of course, but as it has been mentioned, I think that overall it is indeed too early to say who is the winners or who are the losers within the region, but what is indeed true is that the Syrian crisis, although the Syrian crisis has indeed impacted, is impacting the role of the main players in the region, and although we don't see yet reshaping regional order. And I think that starting from there, we can also understand how the relationship between Turkey and Iraq has been evolving. I will focus the presentation on two points, explaining how the Syrian crisis have impacted the relationship between Ankara and Baghdad, and on the other hand, how the Syrian crisis have impacted the relationship between Ankara and the KRG. Because I think that, of course, many elements come into the picture which are not only political, which are not only the Syrian crisis. We should not be unilateral and explain everything through the Syrian crisis, but indeed this crisis is playing a big role especially in this bilateral relationship between Turkey and Iraq. Otherwise, we could not explain how, in the past 6 months, we have witnessed actually this quite clear deterioration of the relationship between Baghdad and Ankara, which has been explicitated by open clashes among the two prime ministers. And I think that we can explain that by, of course, as it has been mentioned, seeing the fact that, of course, for Turkey does not see with a good eye the fact that Iraq domestic politics and let's say, the latest development of Iraqi domestic politics, where we can see an increasing marginalization of the Sunni components which were represented by the Iraqi list, while we see this consolidation on power of a strong Shia government, which is basically taking control of many of the key state institutions, and on that level this is already a first point which kind of creates tension. But to come back on how the Syrian crisis has impacted the relationship between Ankara and Baghdad, I think that also this has played a big role, to the extent that Iraq, the central government, Nur al-Malik central government, has benefited in a way of the how the Syrian crisis has been changing the perception of the role of the main regional player. To the extent that the Syrian crisis has impacted the image of what is the role of, I think, of Turkey and what is the role of Iran in the region, which these two players have been have been the most influential within Iraq for the past almost decade. And I think this has been a great opportunity for for the central government to launch a new perception over its own image in the region, to say, so in a way Iraq has capitalized on that to say that it can have now a different role in the region, it can be a more autonomous player in the region, which is more autonomous from Iran, which is more autonomous from any interference of its neighbors, and which can be instead influential. So this also has created this has created, I think, somehow also it's at the source of tension. But I think that also another element is at the source of tension between the two sides, which is the fact that which is the Iraq position towards the situation in Syria. I think that the Iraq position towards the situation, towards the Syrian regime and towards the unfolding event in Syria, it's quite difficult to analyze, because at the first glance we would say that Iraq has taken a position which is within the Iranian line of supporting the regime, which is true, which has been true so far, but also I think that the Iraq position is more ambiguous than that, because there has been also some statements which were fostering, let's say, which is supporting transition. But anyway, one thing that it was clear that Iraq was opposing any armed intervention within Syria, and I think that and generally we can see that Iraq has been opposing any rapid solution of the Syrian crisis. I think that the element of time, it's quite important to understand how Ankara and Baghdad clashes on Syria, to the extent that Baghdad is kind of benefit also from the overstretching in time of the Syrian crisis, exactly because it aims at having influence in the region, and Syria can be a good opportunity for Iraq to have a new role in the region. So Iraq on one side is benefiting from this overstretching of the crisis, and on the other side Turkey, for Turkey the overstretching of the crisis is the most worrying part, much more than Iran supporting bluntly the Syrian regime probably. So in this sense I see also in this point of course a source of tension between the two. Then let me talk now about how the Syrian crisis has been impacting instead the relationship between Ankara and the KRG, which is, I think, a quite important topic, to the extent that we have seen in the past year, of course, the relationship between the two sides, between the northern region of Iraq and Ankara, has been improving, but it has been until 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it was more a partnership which was based on economic interest, on a partnership which was mainly economic. What I think is quite interesting is to see that in the past months, the relationship has been orientating more towards a more strong political cooperation between the two sides, between Ankara and the KRG. And I think that this is to be related especially to the Syrian crisis, to the extent that the Syrian crisis has had a strong impact in reshuffling the cards of the Kurdish issue within the region. And on one side, it has fostered, now luckily we see the rise also of this PKK movement expanding, not only, I mean, it was already present in the mountain of Iraqi Kurdistan, but now also there are some rumors that the PKK branches of Syria is expanding in North Syria. So, of course, this is a security problem for Turkey, which is very compelling. And on one side there is this, and on the other side there is a more general question of how to solve this Kurdish issue, which has been raised again in the moment that the Syrian National Council has sat in Istanbul and talked how in the new Syria we will set the Kurdish issue. So there has been also this talk that has been open again. And on that level, I think that Turkey and the KRG have found common ground on both issues, like to the extent that they are allies in the struggle against the PKK, although for different reasons. Of course, for Turkey, the PKK is a security threat over its border. For the KRG, the PKK, it's more, I will not say an adversary, but more of a rival, to the extent that within the Kurdish political scene, the PKK is the other strongest political player. So anyway, both sides, the KRG and Ankara, have interest in fighting against the PKK. So in that they find a common agreement. And of course the cooperation, especially in the past months, has been increasing between the two sides in fighting against the PKK. On the other side, we also see that Ankara and the KRG, they find a common agreement in a peaceful solution, in promoting a peaceful solution to the Kurdish issue, which, again, it's against the PKK model of solving the Kurdish issue through the armed struggle. But here I have to say that the cooperation between the two, in a way, is true. They found common ground in a peaceful solution, but on the KRG side, I think that this cooperation has some limit as well, because the KRG is for a peaceful solution of the Kurdish issue, but also it has its own project, let's say, of resolving the Kurdish issue, which is slightly different from the Turkish one. As we can see that the KRG now is pushing, for instance, especially in regards of the Kurdish issue in Syria, for a solution which is peaceful, but also which is giving to the Kurds a larger share of autonomy from the central government, which is something in which the KRG and Ankara can clash over. So I think that this needs to be pointed out, that of course the cooperation between the KRG and Ankara is strong, but also there are some limitations of it, because the KRG anyway is also promoting itself and pushing for a solution which gives the Kurds, if not the federalist option in the case of Syria, at least a more autonomy from the central government, which is a thing that I don't know how much Turkey will be ready to accept. And I will just conclude saying that I think that to understand how the relationship between Turkey and Iraq will evolve, I think that we will have to look at three main variables. The first one is basically how the evolution of the Syrian crisis, and who will have the biggest influence into it. Again, we should not reduce everything to the Syrian crisis, but of course the Syrian crisis and who will, which one, if Turkey will have an influence into it or Iraq will have more influence, will in fact impact, and the way that they will have impact into it, it will influence the relationship between the two. And also the fact that how the post-Syrian Syrian crisis will develop, how the Kurdish issue within Syria will be set. This will be another important element to understand how Turkey-Iraq relationship will evolve. Then the second element, I think that, it addresses actually something which is Turkey domestic politics. It has been mentioned this morning and also in the presentation of my colleague, how much like foreign policy and domestic politics are so much connected in the case of Turkey. I think that the way that Turkey will make steps towards the Kurdish issue within its own domestic policy will definitely impact the relationship between Ankara and the KRG. How much Turkey will be ready to give in the revision of the constitution, which is ongoing, how much autonomy is ready to give to the courts, to its own courts. This will impact definitely the relationship with the KRG. And eventually, the third point, it's again related to domestic politics, which is Iraq domestic politics, which is basically the evolution of the relationship between the central government and the KRG, which will be essential again to the future of Iraq-Turkey relationship. At this point, we see that the KRG is taking a position of being in the middle between the central government and Ankara. It benefits to be on the side of Ankara against Maliki, when Maliki, let's say, is quite aggressive and wants expand its power everywhere. So the KRG, in this case, it sides with Ankara and finds its own wing of protection in Ankara. But on the other side, also, we can see that the KRG does not, I don't think that the KRG trusts 100% Ankara, and it's very much also benefit to stay within the framework of the Iraqi state to promote its own federalist project within the region. So, and it's benefiting from being in the middle of both sides. And I think that the relationship between Iraq and Turkey will much depend on how the relationship between Maliki and the KRG will develop. If they will find, if the KRG will benefit again to stay within Iraq or not, and how much Maliki will be ready to share power in Iraq with their bill. So I will end here, and of course I'm eager to listen to your question, and I will actually, yes, give back.
If you want. So
well, I like to be short and sweet.
Yeah. Now, the floor is to Mr. Timur Göksel. In Lebanon, Mr. Timur Göksel doesn't need to... yes, very famous, and we consider him in the good sense as Turkish-Lebanese colleague.
That's a polite way of saying part of the furniture after all these years. Well, that's okay. Now, actually, you are very lucky, because I didn't know I had to make a lecture of some sort. I thought that this was going to be a panel discussion where we will shoot each other, as we do in Lebanon very professionally. Anyway, so you are lucky, I'm saying, in a sense, because one of my latest ventures is that I am now the Turkish editor of a very interesting Middle East news site, website called Al Monitor, especially those who have to follow the Arabic media, Turkish media, and the Israeli media. Quite an interesting free site. I am their Turkish editor. As a result, as a part of that job, every day I have to read at least 15 or 20 articles on the Turkish media. That's a nightmare. And I thought Lebanon was a difficult place to understand. So, I mean, imagine what will happen to you if I base my talk on what I read. It's amazing. Anyway, but what I'll do is, I'll just pass you my... I've been here 34 years. It's a long time, it's a lifetime. And I'll just pass you to my observations about the Turkish position here. My snippets of information and observation, and I'm sure everybody here will derive the appropriate lessons from that. When I came here in 1979, and for a long, long time, Turkey was absent from the Middle East. We tried very hard. We couldn't get any interest at all. We were busy with Europe or whatever. We had a two-man embassy here. Nobody ever came. And the Turkish media interest was what they got from the international media about the civil war here. That's all. There's absolutely zero interest here, in Palestine, in Israel, nothing. You know when the change came? A lot of people might disagree. The change happened for me in year 2006, during the Hezbollah-Israel war. It was an amazing change. And even more curiously, that change was led by Turkish NGOs, charity organizations, who in the middle of the war brought supplies and relief assistance to Lebanon that nobody else was coming to Lebanon. It was an amazing show of solidarity by Turkish NGOs. Let me give you two examples of what soft power can be. There is a district of Istanbul, I'm not very sure where it is, it's called Bayrampaşa. It's a district of Istanbul, they have their own municipality. The mayor, a charming man, with two of his advisors showed up during the war, I don't know how he came. Airport was closed, he came. He says, we want to help these people. I said, well, who are you? He says, I'm the mayor of Bayrampaşa. I said, fine. It's a district of Istanbul. You know what they did? After the 2006 war, Ramadan came. South Lebanon was devastated. People were poor, they had nothing to observe the Ramadan with. It was a disastrous situation. Many of you will know. These people, he brought two men from his own municipality who spoke Arabic. These two men went to South Lebanon. In the village of Tire, near Bin Jubail, they rented the old Luna Park, turned it into a kitchen. They hired local women and men as cooks. Local, there's nobody coming from Turkey. Then they hired all kind of kitchen equipment, everything from Lebanon. And these two men distributed 18,000 iftars a day to 22 villages. Two men. It was an amazing show. That is soft power at its best. South Lebanon fell in love with Turkey. That's how it started. Another one, this is the official side. A hospital, a children's hospital in Beirut, treating children with, who need dialysis on a daily basis. They ran out of medicine, some very important serum. They said the kids are going to die. There is no way they could get it. There's a war going on. I mean, we are being bombed in Beirut. So nobody's bringing any medicine to these kids. So they sent down to an SOS on the internet. A Turkish doctor in Paris sees this, sends it to his friends in Istanbul, a Turkish NGO dealing with dialysis patients and all that. They said, we'll provide the medicine, but somebody has to take it to Beirut. Because of the wartime, no insurance is given to the ships coming this way. It was impossible to send it by a civilian ship. So what happened? Turkish Navy got involved. I was at the Beirut port on that day. Very noisy day because of the Israelis were making a lot of noise around here. You had to be there to see it. 3 Turkish ships, 2 of them escorts, 1 of them is a small corvette. Turkish soldiers, the whole ship was loaded with serum for these kids. Of course, all the media, local, foreign, they cover this. You know what that means for Lebanese people to see that happening in the middle of the war? Nobody is coming except the Turkish Navy, bringing medicine. Of course, you know, Lebanese bureaucracy is very much like, God bless them, like Turkish bureaucracy. There was a guy at the customs at the gate of the port, right? And he's been watching us all day. The ships being unloaded, loaded onto trucks, right? And we thought that, okay, the children are safe. But just as the convoy was leaving the port, the guy said, hey, do we have permission for this to import into Lebanon? Import? So a very bright Turkish diplomat, who's now an ambassador, he said, these are Turkish ambassador's personal imports for his party tonight. Right? So personal imports, I'll sign for it. And that's how we imported the medicine into Lebanon. 2 small incidents. I think they say a lot of what can be done here. Now, when the zero problems policy first sort of became known in this part of the region, many people called it as a neo-Ottomanism. That's a very favorite term even nowadays. But it seemed to work, especially with Syria. Of course, a lot of people here, and I'm talking about people in the, you see, because of my position with the United Nations for such a long time, I have good relations with all the parties here, absolutely no problems with any parties. I have zero problems also. I mean, I'm okay with everybody. So I talk to everyone. I hear beautiful things from the people of all levels of life, not always politicians. Of course, many people were aware that the Turkish policy, zero policy, was motivated by real politics and interests. We didn't ask any questions. It was a very pragmatic approach. But we didn't deal with the people. We dealt with the official bodies, with the governments. And Turkey slowly became a soft power in the region. Its military power was put in the back burner. But we never really went for values. That's very recent. There are problems. We are being accused unfairly, I think, in many cases. Sometimes it's justified because we are not very... In Turkey, we have a problem. As I said, we didn't show an interest in this part of the world. After we ruled this place for 400 years, then we disappeared. Then we forgot about this part of the world. We forgot the language. I mean, can you believe that there is no Turkish media? We have only one representative of Turkish media based in Beirut, right? Apart from that, you know who's their media correspondent? Me. Every time something happens, I get all these amazing telephone calls. I didn't know that we have so many news channels in Turkey. Amazing. It's scary. Professor, you know, they're nice, mostly young people. We have nobody there. Can you give a comment or can you say something? And then I cannot break their hearts, so I became an instant analyst for all the Turkish channels because they have nobody here. That is a problem. We don't speak the language. Please. I mean, we have a colleague from the foreign ministry. How many Arab-speaking diplomats do we have? 4? Yeah, there you go. You see other embassies here because I deal with them. When these guys deal with the Middle East, they are Arabic speakers. But all their life they deal with the Middle East. They are specialists. We haven't come to the point yet. So there's a problem. We don't really understand what's happening here. And I think the main problem is we don't understand the mentality of the people. This is what I see from reading all the Turkish papers, a bit too much, but okay. Sometimes we seem to be promising more than we can deliver. This was mentioned here earlier. I mean, we said, we want to mediate in conflicts not only between the countries, but sometimes we go a bit overboard and we try to mediate internal conflicts. This is where we go very, very wrong. Turkey is a major state, a growing power economically and politically. Turkey cannot get involved in internal squabbles of a country. Very wrong, because you can't win. You can guide them, but you should not try to get involved. But sometimes we get involved. Then you read in the papers that, okay, the Prime Minister called Mr. So-and-so in Beirut, but then the problem is he doesn't call the other Mr. So-and-so. Because once you start calling the names here, you have to call everybody. Have you heard of any Lebanese visit to Lebanon by anyone who doesn't go through the same list of people that they have to visit? I mean, they have to come, they have to go to the President, they have to go to the Prime Minister, and they have to go to Mr. Berry. If you skip one, you are in trouble. You can't. Well, you can say, I have nothing to do with Mr. Berry. Oh, it doesn't matter. You have to go and talk. You have to pay your respects, drink his coffee, right? And he can give a statement how we discussed the world problems with you. That's fine. He doesn't have to do anything with it. But you have to go through the format. You cannot. That's the way it works. Once you get involved, you have to stay involved. Now, the problem here is you have to sometimes think, in the zero policy or also mediation with the conflicts, what kind of pressure does Turkey have on these events here or on the actors? What political, economic, military, social pressure do we have? Because, you know, I'm sure my Lebanese colleagues will sort of do like this. I don't know if they will say it openly. One of the most favorite ways of solving conflicts in the Middle East is come with a briefcase full of green money. I've been here during civil wars, external wars, internal wars, and sometimes somebody used to say, oh, so-and-so country is, X-country is interfering, we are going to have a ceasefire. So the ex-country's ex-minister shows up in Beirut with a briefcase. We know what is in the briefcase. So they used to buy the parties, 10 days ceasefire, and then everybody says, oh, the kingdom of this or the sheikh of this saved Lebanon. Yeah, Habibi, it's for 10 days. That's as much money he gets. He buys the parties, 10 days ceasefire. Can we do that as Turkey? Should we do that as Turkey? No. But that's the way it works in the Middle East, most effective. In Lebanon, the most effective ceasefires have been when somebody comes with a briefcase or when there is a World Cup on television. Right? Because, I mean, I was here. The only time we used to be able to cross the green line without being sniped at is when there's a football game. Right? Because the parties, the snipers on both sides, used to declare ceasefire so they can watch the game on TV. The danger is you have to be very careful. If you're a savvy Lebanese civil war survivor, you will know that after the game you never cross the line because maybe one of the guys supporting that team has lost one of the snipers, then he's looking for somebody to kill, right? Because he's angry. So that's the Lebanese way of survival. Now, the problem I see is not a criticism. It's, as I said, lack of information, lack of not knowing this part of the world, is that we don't know how it affects when we talk in a very patronizing and domineering style. That offends people here. I mean, when somebody in Turkey says, Syria is our internal affair, come on, please. You don't only antagonize the Alawites in Syria when you say that. There are a lot of Sunnis who don't like to hear that Syria is our... Excuse me, it's an independent state, whether you like it or not. It's an independent state, it's a recognized state, it is a nation, it is this, it is that. But when you say that they are our internal affair, what did we do? Did we colonize Syria? It offends people. We are just not being careful about it. And this excessive self-confidence, the languages that we use, sometimes it gives the impression that, we are being accused of being a as a Turk, it bothers me to be accused of neo-imperialism. I mean, I don't even know the meaning of it, yani. Come on. But sometimes we seem like we are deserving that. You have to be very careful with the language that you use. I mean, you don't say that, well, we are going to lead the Middle East, we are the number one in the Middle East, we are grand, we are the owner, we are the pioneer of the Middle East, we will set up a new order in the Middle East, we are a new role model. Yeah, maybe all these are true, but there's a way of saying it. And then we get accused of being neo-Ottoman. But let me give you one small example, maybe forgotten. Gaza, Israeli-Gaza war attack. The Turkish Red Crescent was one of the first organizations in the world to come to Gaza with relief supplies. The war was going on. Turkish Kızılay showed up. Who didn't let them in? The Egyptians, not the Israelis. Egyptians did not let in the Turkish Red Crescent to deliver supplies. Why not? Because they say this is their backyard, this is their turf, this is their area of influence. They are not going to let Turkey take over. So many times Turkey tried to intervene between intra-Palestinian problems. We were prevented from doing so. We were acting in goodwill, but we just don't understand the local dynamics here. It's not only about Sunnism, which is another problem now. It's also a turf problem. They don't want a non-Arab, although you are Islamic and all that, they don't want a non-Arab country to come and replace the traditional leaders of the region, which are traditionally Egypt and the Saudis. They don't want you to take them over. Now, so, but let me end here because, as I said, then it will go to a lecture, and I don't want to lecture you. I promise I won't do it. And the thing is, I think we overrated our capacity to reshape the Middle East. And we thought that all the regional leaders will follow us. They won't. They have their own interest. And the most dangerous development that I see as a man on the ground, I'm not talking as a politician, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a politician, I'm just a guy living in Beirut, a happy retirement here. But the most dangerous thing I note now is increasing perception of Turkey, or Turkey being increasingly perceived as have taken sides in this Shia-Sunni conflict in the Middle East. This is a very dangerous development. Everybody will cite you 100 cases of not only in Syria, but what we are doing with the, as she said, also with the Kurdistan, right? And we are now being seen as firmly on the Sunni camp against the Shia. We keep saying we are not, but it is how we are perceived, and perceptions are everything in this part of the world. But also, talking about perceptions, look at the map. Turkey, we lost the Syrian market. We lost the transit routes through Syria. Ro-Ro, fine. 10 Ro-Ro trucks, 10 Ro-Ro ships a month cannot carry the load of 500 trucks that used to go through Syria every day, which is down to 4 or 5 now, out of 500. So the Syrian route is blocked. Keep looking on the map. Next country is Iraq. Unless we get our relations in shape with Iraq, they have the perfect capacity to block our transit routes through Iraq also. Iran, oops, another Shiite country. We are like this. Where are we going? So we have to be very careful. They have power over us, economic power over us. Turkey has to try hard to remove this perception that Turkey is now taking sides, despite our denials, with the Sunnis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Personally, I have very quickly 2 points. The first, that I think, as a kind of expectation, that a new Kurdish episode in the Turkish history is now, or starts to be open in Syria. When we discover, without any pretension, we discover with the Syrian crisis that most from near Aleppo to Kamishli, this is most of the frontier are fulfilled by Kurdish cities and villages. So not only in Kamishli region, we discover that in a humble way, I can say we discover this whole region, which is about between 500 kilometers and 600 kilometers of Kurdish. So a new episode of Syrian Kurdish involvement will be added will be starting in the Turkish history. However, the Syrian process is going on. 2, and I agree with the opinion that he said there is a shortage, serious shortage among the Turkish elite in having specialists and Arabists. This is very, and I'm not talking about the Arab. Our shortage is doubled, but this is something different. We have a nation state, big regional nation state, ambitious nation state like Turkey, that has structurally put a shortage of Arabists, put aside like it is in Pakistan or everywhere on Malaysia, some Islamist who knows the Arab language. But more than that, and you know, Anna, I met personally many people in Africa that they can present the whole Quran in Arabic without understanding one word. This is very real, and I hope the Turkish Arabists will not be like that, of course. So thank you very much.
As you know, the third session will be on Turkey and the wider Middle East. How wide we will discover during the discussions. We have two distinguished gentlemen here on the panel. Muhyiddin Ataman from the Abant Izzet Baysal University. Welcome. And Mr. Mustafa Al-Ani from the Gulf Research Center. Nice having you, sir. I'll start with Mr. Muhyiddin. I'm trying to pronounce Muhyiddin in the Turkish pronunciation, not the Muhyiddin Arabic one. So I hope I got it right. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadim Kutesh. My presentation will be about Turkish relationship with the Gulf countries. And on the second part of my presentation, I will try to mention some points regarding the future of the Middle Eastern systems, how to deal with the current and the future problems. In the traditional Turkish foreign policy, there was quite little relationship, or maybe none, between the Gulf countries and Turkey for decades. As in the previous section, Mr. Timur Göksel has mentioned, Turkey was absent in the Middle East, and the Middle East was absent in Turkey in general. The first time that Turkey began to improve its relations with the Middle Eastern countries was the 1980s, during the Turgut Özal period, when he tried to liberalize the country both in economic and political terms. The second wave or milestone is the coming power of the AKP or AK Party, as we call it in Turkey. Both Turkey and the Gulf countries have been following similar policies regarding the most recent developments in the region, especially the Gulf, the Arab insurgency or uprisings or the Arab Spring, however we call it. Both sides, that is, both Turkey and the Gulf countries, ask for and want a change in the Middle East. They supported the demands of the people, both in North Africa and in other parts of the Middle East. But they do not agree on the speed and the content of changes. That is, Turkey and the Gulf differ in asking for the content and the speed of changes. On the speed, they agree. They agree on the speed. Both sides do not support any rupture, any political rupture in the region which may lead the region, the whole region, or any significant regional country into chaos, into political chaos. Both sides, they do not support political ruptures. But Turkey, as a country in the process of political liberalization, they want and support any popular demand in the region. They ask for a state which respects the rule of law, which democratizes, which has a plural society, cultural and economic structure, etc. But for the Gulf countries, they do not want the pace of the changes for the whole region. That is, they want the changes to be limited to Republican regimes. As we all know that all regime changes happened in the Republican states. Tunisia, Tunis, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, and in the process is Syria. All those states have one unique common perspective. All of them, they are Republican regimes. The Gulf monarchies, they do not want any royal regime in the region to be changed. But Turkey, they actually expect the pace of change to include all these states. For sure, we all expected the Arab uprisings, the popular demands will influence and sooner or later will change the cultural, political and economic structures of all states, regardless of republican or monarchic regimes. Both the Gulf countries and Turkey, they used to be heavily dependent on the Western countries. In the years of 2000, since September 11, let's say, to be exact, or to start with a date, let's say, they began to scatter their dependency, and therefore they began to diversify their foreign relations. Turkey initiated some openings regarding the Caucasus, the Balkans, and the Middle East. Similarly, after King Abdullah, for example, came to power in 2005, he also initiated a diversification in foreign policy of Saudi Arabia. Therefore, there are similarities between Erdogan of Turkey, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, and Sheikh Hamad of Qatar. They all try to diversify their foreign relations. Both Turkey and the Gulf countries, they oppose the production of nuclear weapons, whether by Iran or any other regional country. That is, they do not share the Western perspective of not touching Israel, let's say, in the region. They ask for a nuclear weapon-free region in order to maintain the regional security. Both Turkey and the regional countries depend on the stability of the energy market, and therefore on the stability of and the security of energy routes. That means they share a concern, a regional concern. The unique Turkish development, its economic growth mainly depends on the prices of natural resources, natural gas and oil. And we know that the Gulf countries also heavily dependent on the oil market. Another factor, both Turkey and the Gulf countries consider the establishment of a Palestinian state as a precondition of the stability of the region. And both sides, they accept the existence, or they tend to accept the existence of the Israeli state within the borders of 1967. They are not supporting the view of Iran or Syria, their traditionally strong anti-Israeli position. And all this brings us at one point. We see that increasingly Turkey and the Gulf countries are becoming interdependent. That means they need each other in the region. To me, Turkey cannot be successful in its unilateral regional policies. Therefore, it needs regional partners. And the Gulf countries, at least at the moment, nowadays, are, one may claim that the only, but the main candidates for partnership. We all know that Saudi Arabia and Qatar maybe remained only the two countries that has a functioning state structure. Unfortunately, we do not see a functioning state or a close state failure in Egypt, in Syria, in Libya, in all post, let's say, revolutionary states, and we have political instability in other states. We have political instability in Bahrain. The situation is very volatile, as we all know that, or Yemen, or any other countries. Therefore, the two best choices for Turkey to cooperate for nowadays is the Gulf countries, especially Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And there are some indications of the increasing cooperation between the two sides. Only one, I will try to give one example. When we look at the bilateral trade between Turkey and the Gulf countries, for example, we see that the Turkish exports to Saudi Arabia increased 25% from 2010 to 2011. Its imports from Saudi Arabia increased 41%. For Qatar, for example, its exports to Qatar increased in 10 years from 2001 to 2011, increased 140%, and its imports more than 8,000, which is quite high numbers. Its exports to the United Arab Emirates increased 11%, but its imports increased 136% in 1 year. Its imports from Kuwait increased 88%, and its exports to Oman increased 66%. Its imports from Oman increased 43%. These numbers, these figures show that the economic relationship between Turkey and the Gulf countries increased. I missed one point. Both the Gulf countries and Turkey try to balance the Iranian influence in the region. Actually, this position mainly comes from the Gulf countries, not from Turkey. They want to consider Turkey as a balancer vis-à-vis Iran. But Turkey tried to follow more a supra-sectarian policy towards the region. Therefore, as some speakers mentioned in the morning, they are quite interdependent. I mean, Turkey and Iran, they cannot ignore each other in the region as two significant neighboring states. I will stop here due to the timing, and for the second part, I want to mention about the future of the Middle Eastern politics. As a result of the intensified globalization and the increased interdependence, all regional countries have to change their political system and restructure their economic and cultural dealings in future. To me, the nation-state system was and is never fully understood and implemented in the region. We all know that it was a Western concept, and we all know that even in the West, in the European continent, states began to challenge the nation-state system. The best example we all know that is the European Union itself. It is considered as the biggest challenge to the nation-state system. To me, as in the European case, a multi-layered political system is required in the Middle East in order to solve the current problems and in order to achieve political stability in future. If the region achieves this multi-layered system, the regional actor may experience peace and stability. For this, they have to achieve pluralization and diversification, both in their domestic politics and in foreign relations. At the first layer is the local level. Many technical, political, social issues has to be left to the local administration. That is, a decentralization process should be initiated by all states. In the previous session, one speaker especially mentioned the democratization in Turkish society as a precondition of its influence in the Middle East, as a precondition of its Turkey to becoming a regional and global actor. At this level, Turkey and all other countries, they have to initiate this process. For example, when I talk about Turkish system, Ankara has to left some authority, for example, to Diyarbakir, which is the main Kurdish inhabited city in Turkey. The second layer is the national level. The current international borders, we all know that, in the region are artificial. Mainly they are artificial. But still, in order to maintain political stability, I think they should be kept. All these artificial borders, international borders, they should be preserved. However, the national decision makers should transfer or has to transfer some authority to both local and international actors. That means, I was talking about 3 layers. They have to transfer authority to both local and international authorities, whether they are international organizations or transnational civil society organizations, etc. At the third level, I think international and regional bodies and actors should be empowered. Some political and many economic issues, or most economic issues, should be dealt with or should be solved at the regional level. Especially economic activities should be at the regional, at the intra-regional level. Some cities, for example, such as Istanbul, Al-Qahira, Beirut, or Doha, will, I think, and should emerge as regional economic centers. If I give one example, again, the example of Turkey, at the local level, Diyarbakir should be empowered and some authorities should be transferred to the local administrations. But Ankara should be the center of political decision-making, mainly. But Istanbul should not be considered as a Turkish city. It should be considered morely a regional, a Middle Eastern city. Many regional investors, a city in which many regional investors invest and enter economic interactions. Similarly, for example, Shia minorities in Saudi Arabia or in Kuwait, or Shia majority in Bahrain, they should be empowered. I mean, they have to have some authority, political and cultural dealings should be dealt with at the local level. That means it will increase cultural, political and economic diversification and pluralism. That's it for now. I will try to answer questions if they have. Thank you very much.
This is already too much in our plate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now the floor is for Mustafa Al-Ali from the Gulf Research Center. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am the director of the National Security Department in the GRC. Basically, we are the think tank for the GCC, 6 country. My previous life, I spent 11 years in the British government as a counterterrorism department. So this is, I have the practical, not academic experience. Our department basically covered 9 states, 6 plus 3. We covered the GCC, Iran, Yemen, and Iraq. And we involve in a strategic assessment and tactical assessment. I can start from the end of my briefing. From the conclusion, I can say that Turkey emergency as a Middle East regional power or a Middle East power was a good strategic news for us. The strategic term is good news. It came in a time when Arab leadership vacant. Egypt, out of the calculation after Camp David, basically pushed out as a leader or as a power. Iraq, after the invasion of Kuwait. Syria, after the death of Hafez al-Assad. Our crisis in the Arab world, we have no leadership, basically, and still vacuum. This huge vacuum. If you look at the history, always we have one leading state, which try to counterbalance the other state in the region. Now, people saying Saudi Arabia, I live in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are not interested. And if you ask the Saudis, they will not claim they are the leaders of the Arab world. Absolutely not. The question is how I was involved in the strategic assessment of the Turkey involvement in the Arab world for the GCC in 2005. And we just finished now 2 months ago the strategic dialogue with Turkey. All the foreign ministers were there in Riyadh. And we try to see how we can develop the relation. Are we talking about strategic alliance? Are we talking about strategic partnership? What are we talking about? How we assess the view from the GCC? You see, in the GCC, we look at the region. We can see 3 non-Arab powers in this region, which influence policy, everything. Israel, Iran, and Turkey. It is a triangular state, 3, which is non-Arab, but at the same time, they are part of the region, and they're influencing our policy, our attitude. In the beginning, we puzzled what Turkeys want from us, to be honest. Turkey is a newcomer, and Turkey was invisible in our radar and in our strategic calculation until recently. We never thought about Turkey as a regional power. We know Turkey is a part of NATO. We know Turkey is trying to be part of the EU. And we know that during all the Cold War, Turkey was part of the strategic calculation of the West. It never been a part of our calculation. So we confused in the beginning how to deal with the newcomer and what the newcomer wants from us. And why all of a sudden we have this new romance with the Middle East. It is strategically came we understand what happened inside Turkey, the change of government, the change of ideology, ruling ideology. But okay, this is a Turkish issue. Whether going to have impact on strategic calculation, we wasn't sure. So we first start to support the idea, at least I'm talking about the GCC. The recommendation was very clear, to promote the newcomer to our calculation. If we compare the three powers with non-Arab power, we can understand Israel, where the Israelis stand. They are a military power, they are occupying power, and they are intelligence power. They are not economic power, they are not diplomatic power. But in our calculation, we know what the Israelis. We know what the Iranian. It is interventionist power, it is sectarian power, it is military power, and intelligence power. You look at the map, they are in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Palestine, everywhere. With Turkey, we have a problem, because we never looked at Turkey as military power. And never Turkey in the history, since the emergence of a new Turkey, they use the military muscles. In any case, even in the question of Al-Iskandarona, the agreement with the Syrian, yes, okay, they put some pressure, but the crisis was solved quickly. So the question here, how we assess Turkey. We understand Turkey have no interventionist policy in our internal affairs, which is great. I am worried now if the Turkish government or leadership going to use the Sunnis card, the sectarian card. You should never repeat. I don't think this is the right way. This is costly, and sectarian card will not help. For us, we always strategically assess and say, threat perception is sub-regional, not regional. And I can tell you a very simple example. I am heavily involved in assessing the impact of the Iranian nuclear program on our policy. And you see, it is not a regional issue. It is a sub-regional issue. If you go to Morocco, I heard it from top people in the government of Morocco saying, okay, so what if Iran emerges as a nuclear power? Why are you worried? Okay. But my answer was very simple. I don't worry about Polisario, you know. What Polisario is doing, it not worries me. Because I don't feel the heat of Polisario. And you are not feeling the heat of Iran as a nuclear power. So the question here is sub-regional. What's concerned us in Turkey? The Turkish relation with other two powers, the non-Arab power. Turkey relation with Israel, this is how we base our calculation. Forget about economic issue. Economic issue, investment could appear in 1 minute and disappeared in the second minute. Forget about it. This is a marginal issue. This has come after we accept you as a strategic partner. This is an outcome. This is a result. This is not a reason. Because I give you a contract because I trust you strategically. The minute I don't trust you, all your contract will disappear in 5 minutes. So the question here, basically, we are not really, in our priority, Turkish relation with Israel is not on our top list. Iranian relation is on our top list. And again, I remind you, because Iran is a major issue in our internal politics. And if I can assess the relation between Turkey and Iran on favoring my interest, yes. The minute I discovered your relation undermining my security, my strategic calculation, I will change my attitude without hesitation. So the question here is for us, one of the issue, which is major issue, was the relation between Iran and Turkey and Iran and Israel. For possibly Lebanese, Syrian, people living in the Arab East, the priority is not Iran, Turkish-Iranian relation. The priority is Turkish-Israeli relation. But geography always makes history. History never makes the geography. For us, Iran is a major issue. And in this issue, we have a problem to understand the relation between Turkey and Iran. We understand Turkey have interest, economic interest with Iran, is neighboring country, and we are not expecting a hostile relation between Iran and Turkey. But at the same time, we are not accepting or expecting some sort of closer relation which is going to undermine our security. We are not sure where Turkey stands toward the Iranian nuclear program. For us, it's a question of life and death. And we will never compromise in this. Absolutely not. Whatever the cost, I think our attitude is very clear here. And I can tell you the official side of the story. Whatever it's going to take, whether military action, whether economic sanction, we are not going to change the balance of power in the region. So again, where Turkey stands in this. So for us, it's still, we wish to develop the relation, but there's a major question marks on our relation. It worries us when we see Turkish company going and signing oil contract behind the back of the Iraqi government. This is not a right issue. We understand why Turkey want to involve economically heavily in the north of Iraq. But to go and do what the American company is doing or Norwegian company is doing and sign oil contract without the approval of central government, this is not acceptable behavior. So I think Turkey will have a problem in dealing with the Arab country, because you cannot put all the Arab country in one basket and deal with them. You're talking about different state, different interest, and different calculation. I will support if the Turkey is going to deal with on sub-regional, because North Africa have different consideration, Arab East have different consideration, and the Gulf have different consideration. Whether we're talking about one nation, Arab nation, it is not accurate. Strategically, it's not accurate. And this issue which will emerge again and again. Turkey's role in Iraq is important for us. We understand Turkey's security problem in north of Iraq. But Iraq is heading toward a major conflict. What they call disputed area, it is basically twice the size of what the Kurds now put under their control. And if the Kurds are going to win this struggle and going to double their regional control area, I think Turkey must involve here. We expect Turkey to involve here. Neutrality is not a policy when it comes to the national interest and national security. You cannot run away from your responsibility. So I will stop here, but I just want to say a few things before about the Gulf itself. In the Gulf, we welcome Turkey for a number of reasons. The Ottoman heritage, negative or positive, is not part of our memory, because none of the Gulf states was under the control of the Ottoman. So we don't have the memory of the new Ottoman or new Turkey or scheme. We assess the situation according to the reality on the ground without the background of the history, negative or positive. We were very happy when the Turkish government said no to the American invasion of Iraq. Here you have to understand, because this is not the decision. We discovered Turkey can have independent policy and independent calculation from the United States. This is a partner you can trust. They calculate their own interest, and they stood in the face of the United States. This is what definitely this entered our calculation positively. The emergency of Iran after 2003 as the mistake of the American in Iraq, we feel that we need Turkey to rebalance the imbalanced situation in the Middle East. So there is a number of reasons why. It is not love, it is need on both sides. And we are not expecting Turkey going to sacrifice its interest, but they should not expect us, we're going to sacrifice our interest. So I think the relation could be put on better footing and can progress because there is a mutual need on both sides. I will stop here. And thank you very much.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for attending this long day. I'd like to thank Carnegie Middle East Center and Paul Salim for giving me the chance to moderate this panel. Actually, it was, as the previous two ones, great panels, distinguished scholars, and I don't think such an arrangement could have came at a better time. Thank you, Paul, and thanks for every one of you. Thank you, Mr. Mayuddin, and I apologize if some of you didn't have the chance to put forward their questions. Probably in better chance in a second meeting or next meeting. Thank you very much.
Let me invite Sabiha to speak first on behalf of TESEV in closing this meeting. Sabiha, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm not going to take more of your time. Just thank you very much to Carnegie, to all the supporters, and to our Foreign Ministry for being with us. I think this was a very good meeting. Number one, it was really frank. And I made a note of Mr. Alani's point that we need more of these frank and sincere discussions if we want to have a better impact on the policy making. At TESEV, we made a note of it. We will try our best to do that. Thank you very much for this sincere and frank discussion.
Thanks, Sabiha. I want to commend the cooperation between the Carnegie Center in Beirut and TESEV in Istanbul, and obviously also the Gulf Research Center with whom we cooperate a lot. And thank the Foreign Ministry from Ankara also for being present. We hope these types of meetings will include more participants from other institutions in other countries. I really would like to thank the two teams that worked on holding this meeting on very short notice. From TESEV, obviously working with Sabiha, Gokshe, and Jonathan and others, and our team in Beirut led by Robert and Romy and all the interns who've worked very, very hard. And finally, I'd like to thank the translators who've kept up with a very rapid pace of presentations. Thank you all for bearing with us today. The results of these meetings, part of it will be on the website, on video and other formats. But Arab-Turkish relations is something both institutions write a lot about, and there's much on our websites that you can see. Thank you, and see you at the next meeting.